ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together to welcome none other than Shri Piyush Goyal, the Minister of Commerce and Industry, Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Textiles, Government of India, and he will be setting the tone for this dynamic and inclusive dialogue at the event.
And yes, to welcome the Honourable Minister, I do request Mr. Vineet Jain, Managing Director of the Times Group, to welcome him warmly on behalf of all of us.
He will be presenting the Honourable Minister with a shawl. Thank you for that, and I would request Shri Vineet Jain to please take your seats.
Well, we asked the Honourable Minister to take this seat. We'd also like to invite Navika, Group Editor-in-Chief, Times Now, Navbharat, and Times Now for a fireside chat with Shri Piyush Goyal ji. Navika, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Piyush Goyal, for joining us here at the ET Now GBS. In a new avatar, GBS is here, and we are very happy to have commerce and industry, food and civil supplies, textiles. How many more ministries have you got in your portfolio,
Nazar
Mr.
mat lagao, the Prime Minister has just spoken 2 days back in the Rajya Sabha that better to have a black tika to
Yes.
ward away all the evil.
Well, the Black Tika, clearly the honors have been done by the opposition, but that's not the note on which I want to begin this conversation. Mr. Piyush Goyal, to set the tone for the Global Business Summit, my question to you is, everybody's talking about the 10 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government versus the 10 years before that, and whether we've fared better. On many of these indicators, we are definitely doing very well, and probably we've beaten the record of the previous governments. Having said that, when we look into the future and the next 10 or 20 years, because that's what your government is known for, a vision for a longer period, what is the big picture that you would want to paint for Indians and India and for the global community?
Thank you, Navika ji, and thank you, Times Now. Thank you, Vineet ji, for that very warm welcome. Friends, first of all, I'll just correct the perspective a little bit. I would believe that the 10 years that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has served India have been years which have defined India as a nation that cares for 1.4 billion people, as a nation that looks at the development of every part of India as an important element of inclusive growth, as a period where the country took care of the basic needs of every single Indian, be it food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education, needs like electricity at home, digital connectivity, water, clean drinking water, those basic needs that for years looked like a distant dream. I think this has been a period where the common man has been empowered. The common man's desires and aspirations for a better quality of life have been triggered. His basic needs taken care of. Today, he aspires for all those good things which he sees on his mobile phone available in the rest of the world. And that, in this 10-year period, has been our biggest achievement. Building up an aspirational India. 1.4 billion young Indians, our average age is less than 30 years, who will continue to be young as a nation. Next 30 years, India is expected to be a country whose average age will be below 30. And in this 30-year period, by any mathematics, by any projection, any trajectory of growth, when you compound the aspirations of the people when you recognize that we already are a economy, the fifth largest in the world, expected to be the third largest in the next 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, an economy which will not only be a $5 trillion on a nominal US dollar GDP basis, but also which has a purchasing power parity, which is at least 2.5 times that. This has prepared the nation to aspire to add $30 trillion in the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years. And Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi is working to a plan, working to ensure that every single action of government, every single rupee that the government spends goes towards meeting the aspirations of the people of India and to achieve transformational impact on the lives of the people.
Mr. Piyush Goyal, we've seen some of the impact of that. The spending on capital expenditure on infrastructure building is a very healthy trend. But the larger question that people end up asking, and let me remind you about famous economist John Maynard Keynes. When we were in college, we were always told what Keynes' theory was. And Keynes' theory was, in the long run, we are all dead. So let's look at the short run. And in the short run, what are we looking at over the next 5 years? Is the growth enough in terms of its pace to cover the population of this country and the economic income disparities, number one? And number two, are we doing enough to provide jobs and employment to people and actually exploit the age dividend that we have, the youth dividend that we have?
Navika ji, at the outset, since you did quote Keynes, the famous economist had built his whole theory around the 4 elements, starting from the basic needs right up to self-actualization. And I think this government has done honorably on each one of those 4, right up to realizing the dreams of 1.4 billion people to bring back Lord Ram to his birthplace. So in that sense, Lord Keynes' theory has actually been implemented in India best in these 10 years. And when he says that in the long run we are all dead, he does try to espouse a theory that before we are dead, we should achieve all those 4 levels right up to self-actualization. But on a more serious note, I think leveling the people's growth trajectory, giving the less privileged, marginalized sections of society their rightful place, their right opportunities to look for a better future for their children has been the biggest priority of this government. Imagine, we've seen the Northeast for so many years. Tell me one other prime minister or one other government which has focused more on providing honest governance and development to the Northeast as much as Prime Minister Modi has. Think back and you will realize that a state like Uttar Pradesh, the largest state, 240 million people in one state, perpetually considered a Bimaru state, one of those weaker, like the nation was a fragile 5 economy, this was one of the most fragile states. People had almost reconciled to a life of deprivation or being migrant labor and serving Western or Southern India. Today, Uttar Pradesh is the most favored destination of global investors. We have the Bennett University in Uttar Pradesh. Today, Uttar Pradesh provides you the most industry-friendly policies, law and order, which is the envy of the rest of the country, and if I may dare say today the rest of the world. It provides decisive leadership. It provides people who are industrious, very hardworking, skilled, and lo and behold, and infrastructure. Infrastructure which is unparalleled. Electricity, the series of highways and expressways, the way industrial parks are coming up over there, the way tourism is being developed, the way new airports are being promoted. The whole story of Uttar Pradesh, in a way, captures the idea of making India an inclusive an equally developed nation across the length and breadth of India. There are other examples. If one was to go beyond the BJP NDA ruled states, Odisha is making rapid progress. We've seen how, thanks to the transparent auction mechanism that Prime Minister Modi introduced in his very first year in government, today, favored few do not get mines. Mines are auctioned out. The revenue of the auction goes to the state, and the state like Odisha, rich in mineral wealth, which for generations and centuries has suffered from deep poverty, is now coming out of that syndrome thanks to the great mineral wealth that they have, and now becoming a manufacturing base. So my sense is that countries seeing growth across sectors, we are recognizing the talent of our youth. We have focused on skill development. The new ministry was started by Mr. Modi. We have focused on the National Education Policy 2020 so that we don't make idiots out of our children. I think most of the Indian delegates in this important global business summit would have seen the movie Three Idiots. I'm sure we don't want Madhavans in this country where a wonderful photographer goes and becomes an engineer just because his parents wanted him to. I think it's time we started recognizing our youth for their skills, for their aptitude, for the vocation of their choice, and providing a platform and an opportunity rather than spoon-feeding them, empowering them to be good citizens of this country. And I think that's the journey India has embarked upon. Our young men and women make us proud. They are the citizens of tomorrow. They are going to be the architects of the new India that we are working for. And this young demographic dividend is going to take us through to become a $35 trillion economy when we celebrate India at 100.
Well, the growth story, very interesting, very promising, but let me quote a few critics, and you have many of them. The critics say growth rate not as fast as it should be. India getting to the 5th rank would have happened with or without the government. The 3rd position will happen despite the government, if not because of the government. These are what your critics say. And let me point out some numbers in terms of FDI. Do you believe we have miles to go before we sleep, and we will try and tap India's potential as an investment destination when we are compared with countries like Vietnam, the Southeast Asian countries, especially when many countries want to come out of China and are looking for a destination? Last year, we've dropped in FDI. The year before that was a higher FDI. Though, of course, if you looked at the 10-year period, it's 100% growth. So how do you see this mixed bag, and what's the direction forward in the next 5 years?
First of all, Navika ji, thank God for the critics. Because if there were no critics, I would not have an impetus to work better, to work smarter, to work faster. So we welcome criticism. We welcome constructive criticism. We welcome ideas. And this is a listening government. I don't know how many of your participants are aware. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a remarkable listener. If I have a 1-hour engagement or a meeting with him, if I was to put an average over 10 years for every hour that I've spent with him, and as would anybody else who has had time with him, know, 55 minutes, he would listen to you. He would listen patiently, absorb whatever you have to offer him, and in the 5 minutes, he will deconstruct whatever you've said and point out 6 other elements which could make your work better, smarter, and more outcome-oriented. And I think that ability of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to think out of the box, to connect the dots, to see how each element of the work that we do can have an impact, a multifarious impact, an impact which is very multidimensional. That is what has led us to embark on many of the missions that are holding us in good stead as a nation today. Well, the critics are saying that growth should be less. I think that's absolutely welcome. The more they criticize us, the more power this government and particularly Prime Minister Modi gets. We are an aspirational government. We are a hungry government. Hungry as in not in the belly, but hungry for more. As they say in Hindi, ye dil mange more. और दिल जितना ज़्यादा मांगेगा उतनी ज़्यादा मेहनत करेगा. The more you desire, the more you work hard for meeting those aspirations, those goals. And I think it's very fair to say that we have miles to go before we sleep. And I would think till the last breath of every human being, that should be the spirit. My late father, even after being detected with cancer, insisted that he will go to the factory every single day until probably the last 3 or 4, 5 days. And that kept him going, maybe added a few years to his life. So I think for all of us, we do not believe in resting at all. We believe that this is an opportunity to serve, to do more. And I can clearly tell you, we welcome criticism, we welcome new ideas, we welcome out-of-the-box thinking, and we'll continue to persevere, continue to challenge our own abilities, continue to challenge the ability of every single colleague to be able to get the best out of 1.4 billion Indians.
The FDI question.
Well, I think it's elementary, my dear Watson, is what I would have said. But since probably you want to get the technical
You just gave me the
inputs out
critics'
of me,
license, so I said
we are,
you're
we
giving
are
it
all
to everybody.
conscious. We are all conscious that interest rates across the world have shot up dramatically. The United States, where Zareen Daruwala would tell us, you could probably see the Fed at what, 0.5% or 0.75%, 1%, went right up to 5%. And clearly, you saw the impact of flight of capital moving back to the developed nations. That was a period where one would have imagined a much deeper impact on the developing economies than what India witnessed. But the strength of demand in India, the strength of opportunities that people saw in India ensured that we didn't see the drastic fall that many of our other peer countries saw. The fact that we continued to have significant FDI coming in, the fact that a lot of reinvestment of earnings happened even during this period, when ideally I would have thought global balance sheets were very stressed and would have been looking to pull back every dollar they could from India. We continued to see traction, we continued to see money coming in. We may not have achieved the amount we did in 22, 23, but I would think that that's not the material factor at all. The material factor is that it continues to come in, and very often when you see a very rapid growth on any statistic, you need some time for it to cool down also. A very continuous and rapid growth of money flow, liquidity, sometimes is very harmful for an economy also. So I think India has been able to create a very fine balance in our control of inflation. When countries saw 40-year highs of inflation, India is seeing 40-year lows of inflation. Our average decadal inflation over the last 10 years of Modi government has been the lowest India has ever seen in its history. And way back in 1970s, we went right up to 30%. 2012, 13, many of us will recall double-digit inflation. Mr. Modi is the first Prime Minister who mandated the Reserve Bank to make inflation control as their duty, their primary duty. And apart from mandating them, we aligned both fiscal and monetary policy to work in tandem with the Reserve Bank rather than fighting with the central bank. So I think it's been a beautiful journey, a journey of political stability, a journey where we've made India fiscally strong, a journey where the macroeconomic fundamentals of India are better than ever before. In fact, the white paper gives out a lot of deep insights into what we inherited and how we've taken the country forward. I'll just focus on one thing since you've spoken about FDI. Many people tend to forget that August 2013, the Indian rupee had depreciated to nearly 68 rupees to a dollar. I'm talking August 2013. What did the then government, led by a so-called brilliant economist who studied at Harvard, unlike my Prime Minister who believes in hard work, and the economists could only come up with raising debt. We came out with a FCNRB policy to attract Indians, NRIs, to invest in India. We gave them almost 1.75 or 2% more than the market. We allowed NRI Indians to play the game of putting in 5 or 10% money of their own, borrow the rest from international banks, allowed them the arbitrage to have abnormal returns on small money, and artificially improved the rupee strength to make it about 57, 56, 57 rupees to a dollar. Now that 10 rupee improvement was on the strength of a debt that we took on the balance sheet, inherited by the Modi government, repaid along with the high interest by Mr. Modi and the present government. But on the calculation sheet, it may look as if the rupee has depreciated from 57 to, say, 83 in the Modi government. The reality is the depreciation is from 68 to 83, which is barely 1% and a quarter on a CAGR basis. I think this has been a period of tremendous fiscal stability, and today's fundamentals of the economy will hold us in good stead in the Amrit Kal to give us a good level of growth, probably a double-digit nominal US dollar GDP growth, help us bridge the purchasing power parity potential that we already have in the country, and become a $35 trillion economy, a Viksit Bharat, a developed and prosperous India at 2047. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Piyush Goyal, I'll just ask the last question, which has to be a politico-economic question, considering we are heading into elections. I want to ask you the confrontation between opposition and the government, and on the financial front. And I even noticed when you talked about states that have done well, you only mentioned a friendly state, Odisha. You did not mention any of the states ruled by any of the opposition party governments. Is that deliberate, number one? And number two, when on the federal issues of share of finances that states ask for, with huge ads in every newspaper saying, my tax, my right, how do you respond to these disparities and charges of not being very fair to them?
Well, at the cost of your colleagues telling me that time's up, for both the issues, it's not that I took the names of friendly states, but I think one of the principal focus of the Modi government has been our fight against corruption. And that's where some of the opposition states have really let us down. I mean, I'd have loved to talk about, let's say, Andhra Pradesh or Telangana. But what have they done? There's been absolute mismanagement of the economy. We see huge amount of corruption in those states. And they don't lend themselves to long-term stability and growth with the kind of fiscal profligacy that we see over there. Therefore, I had to mention states which were doing well. As regards your second question on the advertisements, I know that may be good for the media to get all those advertisements, though I'm not sure whether Times Now will get those advertisements.
We are a television network.
But I'll just ask you a very simple counter question. Suppose Jharkhand, Odisha, and Chhattisgarh, the primary states which have coal, were to take the view that the coal is ours and we will decide how much power to give to the rest of the country, what to do with the power that we have. Could Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana have even survived as a state? Suppose Punjab and Haryana were to say, and Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, the northern areas, were to say we are the granary of India. The rice and wheat that we produce are ours to determine and ours to consume. What would happen to the rest of the people of the country? Where would they get their food grains from? Suppose Maharashtra and Gujarat and Karnataka were to say, the ports are ours. Would all of the industry in northern India or large parts which are landlocked be left without an opportunity to be a part of global supply chains? And the worst, suppose all of these put together were to say, all this is mine. Are they even suggesting that the Northeast doesn't belong to India? That we have no obligation to the Northeast? I think it's like the human body. If a pin pricks us in the foot, the mouth reacts with an ah. The hand reacts trying to pull it out. The mind is helping us in coordinating all these movements. That is the beauty of India. It is one homogeneous whole. It is one body and soul together. And this togetherness, this oneness, is what defines the very idea of Bharat. Sadly, some people, some governments, some political parties, and even some old 100-year-old parties and their senior leaders propagating a north-south divide, or literally trying to suggest that the number of people will decide how much benefit each state will get. As the Yuvraj said, jo jitni sankhya utna hak, or something of that sort. Or a southern state also ruled by his illustrious family and party, trying to suggest that our taxes are ours only, is truly a very, very deplorable effort to divide the unity and integrity of India, something that every Indian holds dear, and we will give our lives to protect the unity and integrity of India.
2024, done deal?
I can assure you, Navika ji, we are never arrogant. We are confident in our abilities. We are confident in the people of India. We are confident that the people of India know what is best for them, their judgment, and we are confident that the work we have done to serve the people for 10 years will speak for itself. So there is absolutely no arrogance. There is no overconfidence. There is a courage of conviction reflected in our work, and we go into the election with that courage of conviction, the conviction that all of you will stand behind good over evil. Thank you.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Mr. Piyush Goyal. A big round of applause for Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Thank you very much for joining us and for setting off the Global Business Summit conversation.